Carl here from All Media Reviews, another Albums of the Year series video, 1971. Please subscribe if you haven't subscribed, by the way. I don't mention that the beginning of videos enough probably, but thank you if you have subscribed recently. So I'm going to start out in 1971, a bunch of albums in the collage here I don't have. Weather Report's debut album. I know that they were just finding their footing at this point. This is pre-Jocko and everything like that, but that was 24. 23, the second Gypsy album, In the Garden. Not as good as the debut, but still decent. But they're a band that they're from my hometown, and I know I could have gone to their last show. Unfortunately, I didn't. It was just down the street from us, but I was like some sort of conflict, because they were playing at near where I was living, Mancini's at the time, near where I was living at the time. Anyway, Soft Machine, number 22, fourth, again, record that sort of just sampled. I don't own it. I don't really have the second and third one at this point. I did see them live a few years ago. That was kind of cool. So that was number 22. Number 21, King Crimson's Island, which, of course, at this point, Greg Lake had left. I think David Cross had left. I think it was Robert Fripp, Jamie Muir. Let me just see if... I think Jamie Muir was the violin or the percussionist. Let's see. No, Jamie Muir wasn't on this either. That period after Poseidon, before Red, I believe it is, or before Lark's Tongue, is always kind of a blur to me about the Mel Collins and Ian Wallace, basically, and Boz. They had some other people play on this, but of course, Lizard was the year before, and that had John Anderson. I forgot to mention in the last video, but how much I paid for this? Yeah, $10, but these records of, unfortunately, that sort of transitional period, or one of the transitional periods for Crimson have never been I've never fully embraced, but maybe over time I will. Anyway, that's number 21, otherwise it would probably be higher. Number 20, Chicago 3. Well, it wasn't nearly as renowned as the Chicago Transit Authority album, or the Chicago 2, which were both double albums. I think this was also a double album, though. I was just sampling some of it today. It's got this one song called Happy something that has this really cool flute solo, among others. But yeah, Happy. I mean, it is a double album. So I mean, they were doing double album after double album. Happy 'Cause I'm Going Home. It's almost 7.5 minutes. So anyway, so yeah, and it's like some spoken word at the beginning of it. It's weird. That I had at number 20. So all right, now we're getting into some other stuff. Sticky Fingers from the Rolling Stones, number 19, which has Brown Sugar and Wild Horses. Those are the probably most well-known songs on it. Sway, I want to say I've heard also, but Can You Hear Me Knocking? I just struggle. That's the famous one, Sticky Fingers, with the jeans or whatever the people want, especially the women wanted to unzip the jeans. I think there were covers that had that, the vinyl versions that you could unzip the jeans. But I just think the Rolling Stones are a band that historically has just never put out like a fantastic record. They just put out good songs, unfortunately. They're a songs band. They always have been, and they always were, and when their new album came out, I don't know, but anyway, because I haven't listened to it. I've listened to like one or two songs. Came out a few months ago. Number 19, number 18, The Beach Boys' Surf's Up. I did revisit this the other day. I've always liked the title track, but it has some other stuff on it. I didn't talk about Sunflower, which was from '70, an album that I also haven't spent much time with. But I know that like Brian Wilson, he was still involved with them, although he obviously didn't tour at this point, but it has a few other highlights to me, but it didn't have any real hits. That's the weird thing about it. I mean, probably the closest thing was the title track. I'm looking at what I went over the other day. Disney Girls, Student Demonstration Time is weird. It's very kind of retro. Almost sounds like early 60s, late 50s. But it's an interesting, relatable song in a lot of respects. Feel Flows. That was terrific. And Looking at Tomorrow. I mean, I love Looking at Tomorrow. Looking at Tomorrow, Welfare Song. I love it when the Beach Boys... Long Promised Road is another one I highlighted. when they do the harmonies, it's just the angelic harmonies. When you have Carl, this I think Carl did more lead vocals. In like, I know that Mike Love did more of the lead vocals on a lot of the early Beach Boys, but Carl Wilson has just a fantastic voice, and he stands out on this album. On Sunflower, I think somewhat as well, but I think they did a little bit better on this. Again, it was past Brian Wilson's sort of nervous breakdown after he didn't get Smile done, and the band was in a different state, even though this is a couple years after in '71. So anyway, Surf's Up from the Beach Boys. Not a bad record, not a fantastic record at number 18. Number 17, mostly by reputation, Joni Mitchell's Blue. I know I checked out from the library many years ago. I liked it. You know, it's her early stuff. It's folk. It's her folk stuff. You know, the stuff she got well known from getting got well known enough from. You know, I don't think this is the album that has. She talks about putting up a parking lot, but it had at least one, maybe two of her most well-known tracks. And I want to say, was it California? Yeah, and Carrie. But I was looking at the track list, and there was one other song that kind of stood out to me. I don't know if it was All I Want, or, you know. All I know is, yeah, I always liked the Joni Mitchell stuff that had Jaco Pastorius, but this is Blues iconic records. Number 7 for 1971 on Rate Your Music, and number 135 overall. People love this record, like Bob Dylan's Blonde on Blonde, and a lot of records, Highway 61. Anyway, that's number 17. Number 16, Master of Reality from Black Sabbath, which I don't have, of course. And I could say, well, like Sweet Leaf is a standard. I've always liked that song. There's a couple other songs on this record that I enjoy, and I probably have slept on more, but the only thing about the Black Sabbath is they always seem like a band that, like, they kind of milk, at times their music kind of becomes not one note, but it's those power chords, those riffs kind of dominate the sound. Children of the Grave is on this, which I know the live version better. Lord of This World, that's the song I'm thinking of. I think it was using some soundtrack. And After Forever is decent. I've known that song for a long time. And some of these little smaller pieces like Orchid, which is very kind of soft. It's not, dark or dreary or doomy. So, but yeah, that's number 16. Number 15, David Bowie comes in at with Hunky Dory, which has both Changes and Life on Mars. It's been a long time since I've listened to this album, but I know people love it. Like they find it's like Bowie's masterpiece. And while I don't know if I'd go quite that far, I understand its praise. The Andy Warhol song, the Beulah Brothers, Oh You Pretty Things is another one. Yeah, it's a pop record, but it's, before he embraced the whole Ziggy Stardust thing, of course, so no, Kaji, that's not for you to investigate, my kitty cat. So number 15, David Bowie with Hunky Dory. Number 14, I do have a copy of this, so I mostly know it for the title track, of course. It's John Lennon's Imagine. He had a lot of like well-known songs, but like there's not. I don't know if like people consider this record his definitive or Jealous Guy. I don't know if this is the one with Working Man's Dead. No. Oh, Yoko, of course, is on this album. Songs like Instant Karma and there's a few other tracks I always think of Lennon's solo career from the 70s from, but good record, but not one I've ever gotten attached to. I remember I found this for a deal, and I just, I picked it up, and it's like, well, it's got the title track, which is maybe his most famous solo song. Alright. Let's see here. Number 14, I was number 14. Number 13, Renaissance's Illusion, the second Renaissance album with Jane Ralph. Jane Ralph really stands out on this album. There aren't really too many bad songs. Mr. Pine is great, and that's Michael Dunford, actually, so he had been writing with them, but he wasn't an official member at this point. Face of Yesterday, Past Orbits of Dust, Golden Thread. This is a great record. I mean, I don't know, it rivaled the classic period from Renaissance, but in some ways it kind of does. Jane Ralph, I've never heard the Illusion stuff, and I really want to after revisiting this album. That's at number 13. It moved up. Number 12, I don't have a copy of. Classic live album, the Allman Brothers at Fillmore East, which I believe there's versions of it that has the 40-minute Mountain Jam. I'm not a huge Allman Brothers fan, but I do recognize their appeal. And I know their radio hits whatever is it, the Melissa, Jess, was it Ballad of Jessica, let's see here, Whipping Post, of course, like Galactic Cowboy Orchestra covered that. This is one of the most famous live albums ever. Whipping Post. So this is a continuation of my camera dying. Talking about 1971 still, this is attached onto the second part of that video, this video. The Allman Brothers live at the Fillmore East, it's a classic live album. I totally got the songs wrong. I was thinking of Memory of Elizabeth Reed, but the thing is, there's many versions of the Fillmore East live album from them. The standard only had like 5 songs on it, but the version of Whipping Post, there's a couple different versions of it, but there's a 17-minute version, and then there's like a 30-some-odd minute, 23-minute version. But then there's the 35-minute, almost 36-minute version of Mountain Jam. That's kind of what makes this one of the things. It's kind of like Dazed and Confused, 32 minutes off of the Zeppelin album, Song Remains the Same. So, that Whipping Post is a big part of that. But yeah, I mean, it's a classic live album, so I have that at number 12. So number 11, my cat's now having a fun time with my stuff. Marvin Gaye's What's Going On, a concept album and kind of progressive in a lot of ways. Knowing the title track for the longest time, Dan Barrera locally and on K-Fan Radio has always used that as his opening theme. And I always think of, I always hear the guys talking, I think of in Vacation later, it's a later movie, when they're in St. Louis and they go, look at the luggage rack. But no, it's a great sort of R&B soul, very symphonic. This album has a bunch of other terrific songs. Mercy, Mercy Me, Right On, Save the Children, Flying High, The Friendly Skies. Dreamy and symphonic, and it does have the groove and the the danceability of a lot of R&B, but it's very influential. Marvin has a great voice, of course. I'm hardly highly versed in Marvin Gaye's music, but I've always known this album especially to be sort of the go-to and the one people always. It was a concept album about society and the protests of the Vietnam War and stuff, and it's so relatable, and then a lot of civil issues that were going on at the time, and but it's just really well produced. There's a lot to love about it, so that's at number 11. In fact, I may be a little bit low for that. Number 10, Caravan, the Canterbury band, their probably most well-known album, In the Land of the Grey and Pink. Well, I know Caravan best for the song For Richard, because I saw them at Nearfest in 2002. It's, Caravan to me, I like Soft Machine, some Soft Machine, but a lot of the Canterbury stuff I'm either not versed that well in it, or I just find to be more overtly jazz, but not as clever as like the jazz fusion that I'm so into, even though it sort of is jazz fusion in some ways. But Caravan, I would say, is probably one of the only projects one of the only bands, because a lot of it was just like with jazz stuff, with inbreeding, like Caravan and Camel formed a band. I don't know if Richard Sinclair at one point or Pie Hayes, one of these members of Caravan, Richard Coughlin, were with Camel at one point. They called it Carmel. But yeah, and The Land of the Grey and Pink is their most well-known record. I don't think I have, because I don't think I showed it on my vinyl. But I know I've wanted to get their records on vinyl. They're not exactly easy to find, of course, but anyway. That was number 10. Number 9. All right, so now we're getting more into the physical copies. The Who's Next. The album that followed Tommy was before Quadrophenia and probably has two of their most well-known songs, The Who. I mean, you know, people say, well, it's like one Who album, even though Tommy is some people's favorite. This album really kind of put them on the map from a sort of iconic standpoint because it has Won't Get Fooled Again and it's got Baba O'Reilly. Bargain's another great track on it. Behind Blue Eyes, you know. It's a great record. It's not my favorite album from The Who, but in some ways it's more listenable and like repeatedly listenable than, say, Tommy. But anyway, that's number 10. Or number 9, rather. Number 8, Jethro Tull. This is their first sort of more overtly dive into progressive rock, although it's still, like, you call it classic rock. Aqualung, which has the title track. It has Locomotive Breath, maybe the most famous song. It's got Cross-Eyed Mary. Let's see, there's a couple others on here that are, you know. I've always liked this album, but I've found that it's kind of, my God, I think it is, yeah. Hymn 43. It's kind of overmentioned. I mean, it's a good album, but it's not as sort of addictive as or mind-blowing as the stuff that would come after it. But yeah, I always like this album, so I don't hate it by any stretch. It's a little bit like Close to the Edge or Moving Pictures or something like that. We'll find out later. So that's number 8. Number 7, which I have signed by Billy Cobham, the debut album from Mahavishnu Orchestra, or Mahavishnu Orchestra with John McLaughlin, The Intermountain Flame. Of course, they only had really, like, in this particular lineup, in this kind of setup, 2 proper albums. They had some other ones that were under some hybrid names, but yeah, I mean, this is a classic, you know, almost, you know, required listening for anyone who wants to get into jazz fusion or jazz rock. You know, following on the footsteps of, you know, Bitches Brew and The Silent Way, maybe one other record that John McLaughlin, he wanted to do his own stuff, of course, and, you know, Billy Cobham, you know, Jan Hammer, Jerry Goodman, Rick Laird. Hearing Dean McGraw interpret some of these songs also really has added to my appreciation for it. My favorites, probably The Dance of Maya, The New Inward Race is awesome. Vital Transformation. Yeah, this is, I mean, it's kind of splitting hairs, but if I'm going between the 2 Mahavishnu records, this is the one I lean toward first. But it's, you know, I wouldn't be surprised if some of the stuff that was on the next record, Birds of Fire, could have been on this, and vice versa. But anyway, yeah, I mean, I have my own feeling about some of their stuff, which we'll learn later, that are related to their stuff too, and their solo projects. But yeah, number 7, Mahavishnu Orchestra, The Intermountain Flame. Number 6, like Moving Pictures or Close to the Edge, an album I don't look down upon, except there's a few tracks I kind of am sick of on Led Zeppelin 4 or, you know, Ruins or Zoso, you want to call it the non, you know, cover title. It's, you know, this is one of the top 5 most famous classic rock albums of all time. When I got into Led Zeppelin, well, this wasn't the first one I heard. This is the one I needed to hear. Obviously, it had Stairway to Heaven, Misty Mountain Hop. My go-tos are Battle of Evermore and Four Sticks. I love both those tracks, and they haven't been worn out their welcome. Yeah, I mean, a few other tracks. I mean, again, Rock and Roll and Black Dog are the only songs I sort of have reservations about. Misty Mountain Hop, I like the lyrics. The song kind of gets a little repetitive. I've heard it for ages. When I first heard it, I loved it. I still love Stairway to Heaven. I'm forgetting. Yeah, whatever. I'm not going to pull this out here. Well, this will take because I'm already adding on to an 11-minute video. Going to California, I think, is the one I'm not remembering, which is, you know, underrated. Yeah. And When the Levee Breaks, of course. You know, I'm not remembering. Both those songs I like. I mean, Going to California is a ballad. It's nice. They did many others. They did others that I would say are better, but it's still decent. I'm not repulsed by it the way I'm repulsed by those 2 radio staples. And when the Levee Breaks, I like. I mean, that's kind of proggy. It's like the harmonica arrangements on it. It was Plant who did it. So, number 6, number 5, the first of 2 Yes albums that'll be showing up. top 5. The Yes album, of course, the first album with Steve Howe. It has Starship Trooper. It has Yours No Disgrace. It has I've Seen All Good People, of course. They're one of the 3 biggest songs. And it has Perpetual Chains, another song I like. You know, Adventure's decent. Although Adventure always sounds very Beatles-ish to me with the piano arrangements. So the last album at this stretch with Tony Kaye also. But yeah, number 5, the Yes album. Number 4, I actually think I might, over time, might consider putting this up a little higher. This is Tarkus from the ELP, this Emerson, Lake and Palmer, their second album, which has the Tarkus suite, you know, and stuff on the second side that's still pretty good too. I haven't listened to this in a long time, but when I got into ELP, this was my favorite. I mean, I like their other records, and it's kind of splitting hairs, but yeah, I mean, I think of this album first and foremost for the title track. You know, it's a little more ambitious than the debut album in some sense. I love like this sort of little like analog froggy, you know, organ or whatever. It's not an organ that he's playing. That it's I don't know if it's a moog. It sounds like a frog. You know, like a toad or something like that. But iconic cover and everything. You know, it's like this is my favorite album if I'm going to one from Emerson, Lake and Palmer. But in that sense, I almost feel like it could have gone a little higher. But it's again splitting hairs. This is a year that's not as definitive top 5 as some others in the rankings. So number 3, Pink Floyd's Metal. Echoes is a classic epic. Their second epic, you could say, or third epic, if you count Adam Hart and the title track from Saucerful. I actually really love A Pillow of Winds. I think I mentioned this in the vinyl A to Z thing. And I really love Fearless, of course. Saint-Tropez is okay. Seamus is kind of silly, but it's fine. Yeah, it's kind of less is more. It's a surreal, you know, album that, you know, they definitely transitioned from Adam Hart. I still would lean toward Adam Hart when ranking Pink Floyd records, but, you know, and of course the, one of these days I forgot about that. Pure Reason Revolution took their song Brighter Bastards of Morning from a lyric from Echoes. Most people don't necessarily know that, even that are Pure Reason Revolution fans. So, number 3. Number 2, you have Genesis, Nursery Crime. Among the classic Peter Gabriel Genesis, outside of the debut album, that this frequently is mentioned as a favorite. It's not a favorite, but I mean, it's, again, kind of splitting hairs. I still have always enjoyed it. Musical Box, Fountain of Salmachus, Harold the Barrel, I believe, is on here, which is kind of silly. Seven Stones, For Absent Friends, and Return of the Giant Hogweed. That's the other key kind of track. I love the organ and the playfulness of that song. Yeah, I have to admit that this was the first album from them where it kind of hit me over the head. Like, these guys are telling fables, you know, stories, fairy tales. This story about the girl who, you know, she knocks off the guy's head, and then later he shows up with a beard in one of her dream, like in a dream sequence or whatever. The kid, you know, the story of the Musical Box. I mean, Musical Box is a terrific piece. I mean, you're talking about progressive rock tracks from the foundation, the early period of progressive rock. Musical Box is required listing. I don't know if it would be in my top 5 progressive rock songs of all time. No, it wouldn't. It'd be in my top 50 probably still. But you know, great record. You know, iconic record, iconic artwork. I think this is also the first one that Paul Whitehead did. So. Interesting. There's a lot of details on the artwork. You see the croquet and everything like that. And number 1, and again, this is largely splitting hairs. I could have had that. I could have had Tarkus number 1, Tarkus easily. But I'm going to go with Fragile from Yes. I know some people love the main pieces and don't like the solo pieces. I think they actually add to its charm. While this isn't a perfect record, Fragile, among the classic Yes period, the early classic Yes period, this is the one I actually got most into. When I tried to get into Yes, while I had Close to the Edge too, this one I leaned more to. Probably because I knew I was taken into by Roundabout, and Long Distance Runaround. But then ultimately, Heart of the Sunrise became, you know, one of my favorite progressive rock songs of all time. It's just a perfectly written track. It's just the bass line and the kind of the ebbs and flows, the dynamics, and then seeing it in Buffalo '66, and it's perfect. Heart of the Sunrise is absolutely perfect. As much as I believe that little interval pattern was the same, it wasn't taken, but it was the same from that Blind Faith jam, and then later Rush did with, I think it was the Necromancer. But yeah, I mean, and I love South Side of the Sky. It's the piano arrangement, little like piano intervals and stuff, the dynamics in that, and the vocal harmonies. This album has got more sort of go-to enjoyed tracks, and that's why it wins the year for 1971 for me at this point. Again, it's splitting hairs though, and it actually wins sort of the whole, because it's the first album obviously with Rick Wakeman. This is the debut of the classic Yes lineup, and that's why it wins over some of the others that the two, let's see, what is it? Only 2 albums they did on this lineup. Yeah, that's the weird thing about it is with Wakeman, Howe, and Bruford, there are only 3 standard albums. You know, you count Union, I guess. I guess you could sort of lump in ABWH, but really, they only had, it's almost like Mahavishnu Orchestra, where Mahavishnu Orchestra only had that lineup, I believe, for 2 albums also. The quote-unquote classic Yes lineup with, the 5 members, Johnny Anderson, Chris Squire, Steve Howe, and Rick Wakeman and Bill Bruford. You only had this album and Close to the Edge, and then Bruford left, and then Wakeman left, and, so... Anyway, that's it for 1971. Since I'm off today, I'll try to make my way through some of these others, and then, of course, the editing is going to be... So some of these videos may not show up till later in the week, but thank you for watching. Please, like I said, please subscribe if you haven't subscribed, and we'll see you next time.